What's up, guys? Welcome back to episode 3. I'm really excited to be here with you guys today. Behind me, I have the L16 block that we've built, not completely finalized yet, still in the beginning stages of machining, and I'm gonna go over all the cool things we're doing to the block. Also, a very important upgrade that we're doing to the block. I mentioned in the previous video when talking about the cylinder head that we had some information about cylinder head studs and preventing head gasket failure. All right, so first things first, let's introduce you to our block. So for those of you that aren't too mechanically inclined and have some ideas about performance with ESIs and or other vehicles, but have never really seen an engine completely disassembled, here's your chance to get a good eye and an explanation on what exactly is all going on here. So as you can see, we have the cylinder block here, and special thing about this block was purchased through Two-Step Performance. So big shout out to Corey Poole for developing this block with CSS Performance. CSS Performance is cylinder support system, and I think they're up somewhere in the Midwest. Jeff over there, great team as well. They've essentially designed the support system for this block. So what that is, so the block in its factory form is completely different to this block in the sense of where you see these drilled holes here, those holes are completely open. I'm going to show you my V18C Type R engine so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. But on this engine, that has been completely filled, and the reason why they do that is because from the factory, these sleeves that are built into the engine are fairly thin. So what that does is give all the cylinder walls extra support for higher pressures and higher temperatures. So as you run more boost, you run more fuel, things tend to get a little bit hotter. So that support along the walls essentially helps hold a lot more boost. On our cars, from the complete factory standpoint, these cars can see as much as 20.5 pounds of boost. If you compare that to any old Honda engine, 10, 15, 20 pounds of boost, you are making some pretty high numbers. So the fact that this small engine with its economical characteristics is pushing out that much boost is honestly quite frightening when you think about the failure points. Speaking of some of the failure points, here are two rods. Coincidentally, the two rods that I had low compression on, they are both pretty bent. You can see more so rod number 3 and rod number 4. Rod number 4 has a small curve to the left. Rod number 3 is almost like an S, and you kind of got to get it at the right angle. So on this particular setup, you can see I'm running the Science High Performance Series rods with the JE pistons. These are both custom pistons, bored over to 74 millimeter. The factory piston size is 73.5. So as I mentioned in the previous video, unfortunately we have these two rods that were bent due to the head gasket failing. So for those people that are driving around knowing that they have issues with their cars, there's only additional damage that can be done to the car, and you don't want to keep spending money when you're building these engines. So might as well completely stop now, or stop whenever you have any issues, you know, and just address the actual problem before you continue to make it worse. Now, the block, as I mentioned, is not completely finished, but I wanted to show it to you guys before it did get finalized. And so one of the key differences that we're going to be doing to this engine that wasn't done prior, that should be done if you're planning on pushing high boost, is we're going to fire ring the block, or O-ring the block, depending on how you want to refer to it. For those of you that aren't familiar with O-ringing or fire ringing the block, this is an old school traditional diesel secret that they've done to their engines. If you know diesel engines, you know that they're high torque engines, high output boost engines, and very high compression engines. So it is important that they keep all of their combustion completely sealed. So essentially what happens is Jeff over at CW Pence machines a groove into the block right around the combustion area, as such, right? And what that does is it presses up against the head and creates a complete seal. I'm going to show a video here quick so you guys can have a little bit of a better understanding of what it looks like. And
sealing combustion pressure in any big banger engine, whether it's a Barra or a single overhead cam like this or a LS or whatever, requires some pretty interesting engineering to keep the head sealed onto the block, especially when you're talking 70, 80 pounds of boost. What we do is we use a system called fire ringing, whereby we make a phosphor bronze ring, which is a little L-shaped ring which fits into a groove we machine in the block to locate the ring in place. This material is a interesting material. It expands around about 18% when it gets hot, which means it then pushes up against the underside of the cylinder head when it starts to get warm.
So as you can see, the efficiency of the fire ring and the absolute abuse that the fire ring can take, it is honestly a no-brainer when developing your engine. Personally, in my opinion, something they should offer whenever doing these engines, there should be an option to where you could O-ring or fire ring the block, depending on, you know, stage 1, stage 2, or stage 3 block, and kind of give you a definition of the comparison between all of them. But in my case, now that I have everything completely disassembled, I don't want to have to go back and go through it and continuously blow head gaskets. So I'm doing everything preventatively now. Although I might not be pushing 100 pounds, 80 pounds, 60 pounds of boost, I want to be able to hold that power to have everything ready now. I don't want to get gapped by a car and then say, crap, well, now I got to open up the engine again and let's fire ring it now so I can turn it up. I'm not saying this is something you essentially need as a part of your build, but I'm just letting you know about this information that not a lot of people are talking about. Now, looking at another very important component to holding up all of your abuse and power. To your left, we have the L15 upgraded ARP head stud, which, if you don't know, two-step performance cells, MA performance, many companies do. However, this particular stud is off of a Hayabusa. And someone found out that they directly bolt in, and so that's what people have been running. I believe more recently someone has actually came up with a formula that are identical and have the appropriate measurements for our cars, and so it is officially the L15 stud. However, in this case, this is the Hayabusa one. So interesting enough, since the block has been out, as I mentioned in the previous video, we are going to be upgrading the head studs on the block to look for better clamping force. With more boost comes more pressure, and the more the cylinder head and the block want to fight each other to separate each other. So the more that we can squeeze the two together, tighter we can get a seal, the less probabilities we have of continuing to hurting our engines when blowing the head gasket. So you'll see the B and the L here, and that might give you a small hint as to where I got the head stud from. So our engine style again is the L15, but next door to your right, I'm not sure if you can see this in video, but you should be able to. The stud on the right is a lot thicker than ours, and to give you an idea of how pencil thin our head studs are, there you have them in front of you. So the B series is a very small displacement engine as well. In this case, a B18, so a 1.8 liter. And these studs are the same ARP studs and the same grade as for the L series. However, look at how much thicker the stud actually is. Making a comparison from right to left, you'll also notice the thread pitch that screws into the block is also a lot longer for the B series engine. It's also a little bit of a bigger engine. But in our engines, that would be completely amazing on helping us achieve a better seal and more clamping force. I've actually took measurements with the vernier caliper you see right up here and found out that these are the measurements that they gave. So the B series head stud is 3.75 millimeters thick. The L series, on the other hand, is 3.3 millimeters thick. Interesting enough, the B series stud, well, 52 thousandths of a millimeter thicker than the L series. So that indeed shows that that stud will be able to hold a lot higher boost pressures and do it a lot more efficiently. If you were to take a guess on which one of these two would bend or fold or crack or break first, I'm willing to bet you'd say the one on the left. And that is what our upgraded head studs are. Now thankfully, we're actually in the process of figuring out a head stud that bolts right into the block without having to tap the block, without having to screw into the block, without having to do any of that. So the B series stud is going to be the stud that we're going to be running on our block here. Now, if you plan on running this stud on your block, there's only one thing that you need to take into consideration. It fits perfectly fine into the block, just as the L15 stud does. The B series goes right in. In fact, has a couple of extra threads to help keep the head sandwiched onto the block. Now, issue that we ran into is the stud itself fits on the block side, but does not fit through the head. So at the machine shop, they will be drilling the heads to fit a thicker head stud. Although the block itself has a lot of extra room and surrounding area, the head itself does not. And here it is. So here's our cracked head that I demonstrated in the last video. And I have both head studs here that I want to show how they go in, and so you can see the differences that need to be made in order to run a thicker head stud on this style engine. Here's our L15 stud. We're gonna go ahead and put it into one of our holes here. Boom, you can see it fits right in there. It does have play side to side, just like it does on the block, but it does fit in there. However, on the head side, we have the B series stud, and if you take a look here, it does not fit into the hole whatsoever, not even close. So at the machine shop, Jeff and his team are gonna be able to drill these holes out bigger so we can fit this stud in. Not that much of a science, however, not something you could do while your engine is still in the car. You wanna obviously make sure you keep any metal debris away from the oil, and now that the engine is completely disassembled, it can all be hot tank and pressure cleaned. So this stud will require modification onto the head. Although this video is driven to talk about all the information that no one really talks about, it's also out there to show the gearheads that are into pushing the engine beyond its limits, and once you have it all apart, making everything right. And that is what this stud here is going to do, and it's going to help us a ton, because like I said, in comparison, you can see side by side how small that damn stud is. Now before ending the video, there's one more thing that I want to talk about on the block that I found out at the machine shop as well, that it's something that when rebuilding these engines we have to pay close attention to. I ordered a new set of red bearings for this block. So for those of you that aren't aware, there are a different set of bearings and they have different tolerances that you can order from the dealership or wherever you order parts. Particularly I order my parts from Honda Parts Now. So on their catalog you'll see there's a series of colors, and for this particular engine they're red. There are two different reds though when you look at the main caps, and I'll show you what the main caps are. Essentially it's where the crankshaft itself rides on the surface of the block. There is a bearing there, and on those bearings there's two different reds. So I emailed Honda and said, hey, which red is for my car? Because I'm using my VIN number on the catalog, hence the VIN number doesn't necessarily account for which color bearing you use. That is more so decided on the machine shop. So for the red one, they reached back out to me and said, we're honestly not even sure. Now Jeff at CW Pence was able to see that when the engine was previously built, they installed some right bearings, some wrong bearings, and so both of those bearings essentially are going to be necessary unless you modify the block to feed it oil properly and accordingly. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So here's the bottom side of the block, and you're looking at the main caps. Without removing the main caps, it's impossible to show you exactly what I'm talking about, but I'm going to get as close as we can because you can still visibly see them. But on the inside of this, what'd you say? The main surface is actually on this side here, and oil is fed through here. So essentially, when the engine is running, there's a small film of oil in between the bearing and the engine, so they essentially never touch. That hole again is what feeds oil. Now if you order the incorrect bearings, there is a strong chance, and again there's two different bearings for the reds at least, that you may run into oil feed problems. The bearings themselves have small holes on the bottom of the bearing for it to feed oil, so you get proper lubrication. But the bearings that were installed on this engine were not aligned properly to those holes. So that's something you want to definitely be careful with, is make sure you're getting the proper lubrication. Had I not found out this engine would have been completely destroyed. The crankshaft, the block, I would have threw a rod. There would have been a lot more carnage than what have I already caused. All right guys, so that's pretty much gonna wrap up today's video. So as you can see, we learned a little bit about more clamping force, learned about what works and fits on the block, but also found out that same stud does not work on our heads. So if planning on running the thicker B series stud, make sure you remove the head, have it sent to a machine shop and re-drilled for that head stud, and then you'll be ready to send it to the moon with all the boost. Thank you to everyone that's reached out to me ever since I started this series and just educating everyone a little bit more about these engines, because no one really educated me besides people that are outside of the realm of the L15s. So I'm here for you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to comment, or you can also message me personally. Any information that I know, I'll be more than happy to share with you guys. And that's what we're here for as a community, to kind of be there for each other and help each other so we don't go through these issues all the time. I do want to give a huge shout out to our sponsor for this video, Clutch Masters. If you guys need a clutch, which you do if you have a factory clutch, make sure you check out clutchmasters.com. I've been running their clutch for a series of years now, since my original 2017, and now I'm running it on this setup. We actually have a special clutch coming from this car, and that's what we will be talking about in a video very soon. So again, check out clutchmasters.com if you're looking for a better performing clutch to hold up all the power that we all want to make. Chris reporting you guys this video. See y'all next time. Peace out.